Hello, thank you for joining me today. I am Kim Howard. I work for Kentucky Autism Training Center. We are going to look at everyday visual supports for students and how we can use those more efficiently in our classroom settings. Let's define visual supports. Visual supports are concrete cues that give us information that students need to be successful in their school day. This graphic comes directly from the NPDC Autism from 2020 report, and I will tell you that I love this. If I'm utilizing or using visual supports in my classroom, I would probably print this out. And if I have a display area for adult information, I think this is great information for your classroom assistants and anybody else who comes into your classroom to be able to see. But especially for myself as the teacher, when I'm planning for using this with my student, I can print this out and say, okay, I know here's how I can use visual supports best in my classroom. It also shows us that, so it gives us the framework for the evidence-based practice of visual support. I can see that visual supports is an evidence-based practice that's used primarily from preschoolers through young adults or that late high school age. There is some evidence of visual supports used for motor skills in toddlers, but for our talk, we're focusing primarily on preschoolers through young adults. I can also look at the outcome areas, and I know that if I am working on a play goal for a preschooler, elementary age, or middle school, and even high school or young adult, that I could choose visual supports to help me make progress in that area. And I like that it shows you the different outcome areas that you can use visual supports for. If I have a young adult and we are working on vocational skills, then visual supports might be a great tool to use with them. So just something for you to know that that's out there, and that's free to print. And the link for this, I believe, will be at the end of the training. Why use visual supports? The biggest thing for me when I was in the classroom was I needed my students to be as independent as possible. Having an adult with a student at all times is almost impossible for most classrooms, and for many settings it's just not practical. So I utilize visual supports to replace that adult in many situations and to increase my students' independence. They could check their schedule on their own. They could go through the lunch line process on their own if they had that visual support reminder. I also really wanted to increase my on-task behaviors. I needed my students doing what they needed to be doing. And for many of them, if I tell them the directions or if I tell them what we're supposed to be doing, those words disappear. And we run into kids who have executive functioning difficulties. They don't necessarily remember what we just said, and ADHD type issues, students with autism, many of these students don't remember what was said. Words disappear. So it's a big problem. I give a lot of oral directions in my day, sometimes to students. So that's something to think about. If I'm telling students constantly what to do, then that might be a place to where I need a visual support to help those so they can come back to that. They can come back to that as a reminder of what am I supposed to be doing right now? Page 59, that's the page that I need. Also, visual supports can pull out the key information that students need. So maybe I'm giving them so much information that I'm going to highlight specific parts. So page 59, maybe that's on a instruction sheet for a worksheet or for a group activity that we're getting to do, and I'm going to highlight the key information that those students need so that they can focus in on the important parts. Visual supports can definitely make our day so much better for many students, whether they have autism or a variety of disabilities. And that's what I like about visual supports, is we use them in a lot of situations. They're so applicable, they're so able to be used with many students. So what are the different types of visual supports? So the first thing I always think about are pictures. And for many of our students, we have to think about what kind of a picture. Maybe it's an actual real photograph of the student doing an activity or participating in something. Maybe it's something more like a board maker type symbol. I've utilized Google Images for some things. We have to think about what type of pictures do our students need or understand. And for some of our students, it might be an object. An object is definitely a type of visual support. So maybe an object schedule or an object to represent something in their day. Written words, if we have students who are readers and they read and comprehend, then definitely written words can be a great type of visual support. Environmental arrangement, so just setting up your classroom so that there are clear visual boundaries between activities and items. So many years ago, I had like a kidney type table that sometimes we use for snack and sometimes we use that for student work. And so when it was snack time, I put out a very specific, I had a blue tablecloth that went on the table when it was snack time. And that tablecloth was the visual signal that now it's snack. This table, you're coming to this table for snack and not for work. Students were very happy when the blue tablecloth came out. Maybe it's a script. So a script is usually a short, brief, it could be some sentences, it could be some sentences paired with a picture. I had a student many years ago who utilized a script to help him ask people to play with him. So it literally just said, "Will you play with me?" And we practiced what to do if people said yes, what do we do if people say no. And in the beginning, he needed the actual script kind of written on a little piece of cardstock with a picture. And eventually, we were able to fade that script out. He kind of internalized those words and was able to use it. And I can tell you, 13, well, probably 12 years later, he still uses that script, even though he no longer has the paper. Maybe it's an organization system. So something like a work system, something similar to the teach system. So here is the specific organized system that we've set up to teach you how to work, and we'll talk a little bit about those in a bit. It could be a timeline, maps, our visual schedules that we give students. There are many different types of visual supports, and so obviously we won't be able to talk about all of them in this particular session, but just know there are so many different ways that you could use visual supports with your students to support them to be more independent. And to support them to be able to do the things that we want them to do to be successful in their day. We use visual supports every day. It's built automatically into our lives. I think this makes a great case for teaching our students how to use visual supports and providing them with the specific supports, the specific visual supports that make their school day run smoother. Think about your day so far. What visual supports have you utilized already today? I know at my house I have dug out my calendar. my visual schedule, my calendar tells me where I need to be, what county I need to be in, what location. Am I working from home today? Am I working from Pike County or Greenup County? I don't know. Without my visual schedule, I would be lost and I would probably be in the wrong place. So I think sometimes I get pushback from teachers on teaching visual supports, and I don't think that we always think about how much of a useful life skill it really is to be able to utilize visual supports and how much we use them every day. Driving in a new city, I'm looking at the traffic signs. Hopefully in my own city, I occasionally look at the traffic signs. Being lost, if you've ever been lost somewhere, looking at the map, trying to find your way. Every human uses visual supports at some point in their life and probably some point in their day. So it's something we definitely should think about as a life skill that we are teaching students. It's not just something extra to do, but this is a good life skill to know. I love this graphic from northstarpaths.com, 9 reasons to use visuals. We know that hopefully visuals are permanent. I do tell teachers that you might want to have extra copies on hand of visual supports just in case they come up missing or tucked into the bottom of someone's shoe. I had that happen a few times. So visuals are permanent. Spoken words just disappear. They also give the child time to focus on what's being said. So it allows time for language processing. Many times we speak very fast and we speak a lot of words without thinking about students who need extra processing time for language. It prepares students for transitions, and visuals help kids see what you mean. Visual supports will help all the students in your classroom, not just your students with disabilities. Many students fall on that in that gray area. They don't qualify for special education help, or maybe they're on a 504 plan, but they still need those visual supports. So having good foundational visual supports in place for all students it'll benefit your classroom as a whole. It builds independence, and it also transfers between environments and people. So the visual support can travel from fourth grade science class. It can help the student. Visual supports can travel on with them from science class. Maybe it's a visual support that's still going to be helpful when they travel on down to Mrs. Jones' class for reading. And it's going to encourage consistency among your adults. So if you have students who are traveling from place to place and that visual can travel with them, or if you have students who are just traveling between adults in the same setting, that visual support is going to help remind your adults as well. It's going to encourage those consistency in procedures and expectations and your routines across all the people who are involved with that student, which is a major benefit. Getting everybody on the same page will only benefit your student. Visual supports do not have an attitude. There's no tone, no frustration or disapproval. I had a student that we utilized a visual schedule with because there were certain activities that they hated, and he was a very aggressive student. And in the past, when someone had told him, hey, it's time for, whatever, he would attack the teller. He would attack the person who said those words. And so when we put it on a visual schedule and we stopped saying those words, then he stopped being aggressive towards the people in the classroom, at least for that particular thing. It's hard to be mad at a visual support, right? And if you are mad at a visual support and you need to smack that visual support on the wall, well, that's much better than smacking the adult or smacking the other people in the classroom. Definitely something that we continue to work on, but it transferred that aggression from the human to the visual support because they don't have an attitude. They don't have a tone. It's what's happening now. It's time to clean up. It's time to transition to the next activity. It just is what's happening now. Visual supports help reduce anxiety for many children with autism, and then even just children with ADHD, children who have anxiety disorder. Not knowing what's coming next or not knowing what the expectations are in a particular setting produces anxiety, which is going to shove them into that fight or flight mode. The more anxiety I have, the more tense and upset I am, the harder it is for me to learn, and the more likely it is that I will have a meltdown. So visual supports are going to help reduce that because the kids will know, students will know, what are the expectations here? I know what I need to do next. I know I need to turn to page 59. I don't have to be worried because, Miss Little wrote page 59 on the board and circled that in red, which is my cue that's where I need to look right now. So there are many other reasons to use visual supports, but these are just a few of them. So no, you must teach visual supports. Students won't automatically know how they work. And we're probably going to use a couple of other evidence-based practices to do that. Prompting and reinforcement are both their own categories of evidence-based practices, and I'm not going to go in depth on what those are, but hopefully you're going to utilize those. Many times we want errorless learning when we're teaching visual supports. I want kids to get it right the first time, so I'm going to prompt heavily, reinforce heavily in the beginning, and I'm going to have a plan to fade out my adult support, to fade out that additional person so that the student then is independent in using that visual support. And if I run into problems with the student, it doesn't seem to be able to use that visual support, I'm going to go back and look at, did I teach this correctly the first time? And then if I have taught this and the student is still not successful in using the visual support, then I'm going to look at the setup of the visual support. Maybe my graphics, the pictures that I am utilizing or using, maybe the student isn't able to understand those as well as I thought. So I'm going to go to a real life picture of the object, or maybe I'm going to go to a real life picture of the student using the object. And if that doesn't work, then maybe I'm going to go back to an object versus a picture or some type of a graphic image. So just a little bit of troubleshooting tips. This is probably one of the biggest errors that I see when we use visual supports is we don't teach it well enough in the beginning to make certain that our students understand how to use that visual support. This isn't something we want them to guess at. We definitely want them to know how to use it. And we want to teach the other adults in our classroom how to use that visual support. I need everybody to be on the same page, showing them the same way so that students aren't getting mixed messages.